and welcome back to Key the Lights here on Princeton Community Television. I'm Misha.
I'm Jenny.
I'm Rachel.
And here with us today we have Holly Bull, and she's the president from the Center for Interim Programs. And she's going to tell us all about the gap year today. So, tell us what a gap year is.
Okay, so a gap year, it should really be called gap time because it's actually any period of time. But typically it's between high school and college when people take a break, and they do a variety of things in different areas of interest. Or it can be a break once you get to college. So I took a gap year myself before college, and I took a gap year after my sophomore year in college. But I also work with people who are in, post-college. I have a woman right now who's 62 taking gap time. So it's really for all ages, and it can be any period of time.
And
what is the best age for a student to go?
I think there's a really natural break between high school and college. So for you all, when you finish up high school, you might be a little bit tired of sitting in a classroom all these years.
Yeah.
So it's a really nice time for you to step back and just say, hey, who am I? What am I interested in? Let me go and check some of these things out that I've been studying in classes, or things that I might want to pursue as a career down the line, or it's something I might want to major in college, and actually go and put your sort of foot in the water of that field. So I think, 17, 18, 19 are the great ages to go.
So when did you organize this whole
Gap year thing.
corporation? Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't actually start the company. My father started the company. And his name was Cornelius Bull. And he was a teacher and a headmaster for years. And he always saw a need for something like this. And actually, it was in the 60s he started collecting program ideas and just threw them into a shoebox for about 20 years. And then he started Interim here in Princeton in 1980 when I was graduating from high school. So I went to Princeton High School for 2 years and took a gap year myself at that point. So I was one of the first to go and do this. So he started it off at a time when nobody was talking gap year in the U.S. And now it's not mainstream now, but it's much more common. Yeah, and there are many more people taking time. And I'm very biased because I took my own time.
So, you went on a gap year.
Mm-hmm.
Did you travel anywhere special?
Yes,
Really
I
special?
did.
Where'd you go?
Well, what I told my dad was I wanted to do something in marine biology, and I wanted to go back to Greece because I'd been there when I was 11 and I liked it. And that's all he had to work with. So my gap year was working in the summers. I actually worked as a busgirl at the A&B, the Alchemist and Barrister restaurant, to save money to pay for all the airfare during my year. And then I went off in the fall, so my friends were heading off to college. Off I went to Hawaii to do aquaculture research. Because I thought, if I'm going to be a marine biologist, let me go and see what this field is like. And after about, a month or so, I thought, I don't have the patience for this. This is not something I want to pursue. So that was really helpful to know before majoring in that in college. So that was 3 months in Hawaii, home for a break in between to actually apply to colleges halfway through my gap year. And then I went to Greece in the spring on an academic cultural study program. So studying modern Greek language, history, poetry, literature, with my peers. So it was those two main things during the year.
So how is it different from a foreign exchange?
This is not usually academic. I mean, you can do something academic during a gap year, but typically people are stepping away from the formal academics. And so they're not usually taking the classes, although you can. And it's also not one thing for the whole time. Usually you're doing a couple different things during the year. But you can do foreign exchange. I mean, you can certainly go and live with a family, study a language. You could be in Spain, you could be in Morocco, you could be in Australia.
So you don't have host families?
No, you can stay with host families.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It can be really anything. I mean, when I say a gap year program, it could be doing an internship like what you all are doing, helping to run a TV studio or working in a studio. Right now, you all are getting a really good sense of what this field is like. And it's great that you're doing it at the age you're doing it. And you have way more experience than a lot of people who might be majoring in this in college. So this is a really great example of something. Or you could be going off and working with animals somewhere, or teaching, or doing, business internships. I mean, it just depends on what you want to do. There's so much out there you can get at.
So what type of student would you think would be good for a gap year?
I always tell people anybody who's interested is a good student for a gap year. And the type of student can really vary. I mean, you can have people who are really high-powered students heading off to top schools. You can have students who are, decent students, but just not that excited about learning, or they're not sure what they want to focus on. And you can have students who have learning differences who really need to take a break probably from just being defined by school, and learn in a different way and see where other strengths are. So it really runs the gamut. I mean, what would you all do if you could take a gap year?
Ooh.
Europe, Central America, and South America.
Europe,
She wants
Central
to do
America,
it
South America.
all.
Okay, so
Yeah.
she's got to travel.
Yeah,
Yeah?
she has a very high bar taste. She wants everything, right?
Uh-huh.
Right, Rachel?
Yeah. And to come to the next question, what country do you have?
How many countries?
Yeah.
There are certain places in the world where we don't send as many people. So
Like
if-
Syria.
yeah, places that aren't quite as safe, places that don't have as many program options. So what we see is, Europe, Asia, all different parts of Asia. People are going to certain places in Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, the United States, Canada. So it covers quite a lot of territory. But what would you all do? Oh, you didn't answer my question here.
Oh,
I got hers. She knows what she wants to do.
I think I would go to learn a language. I really like Spanish.
Yep.
Spanish is fun. Like you guys know, like just try and speak Spanish.
Right. And that,
Do-
by the way, is a great example of something that may not be that exciting sitting in a classroom here in the States.
Yeah.
But if you actually go to Costa Rica, for example, and you're living with a family and you're teaching kids or you're working with animals, you're hearing the Spanish, you're chatting with your family, it's going to bring it alive. You're going to be so excited about the language. And it actually will be flowing out of your mouth comfortably.
I went to Peru last spring break and I learned so many words in Spanish.
Right.
More than I could have learned in like a month of classroom.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's helpful. So do people go just for learning a language? Is that something that people do as well?
Some people. I mean, it depends. This is so much geared toward whatever somebody's interested in. And you don't necessarily have to know what you want to do, but you can circle locations in the world. This is how I work with people. So you just circle locations in the world and all these different areas of interest, and then I just start peppering you with ideas. So if I see Spanish, I'm going to say, hey, here's where you can go to Spain, you could go to Barcelona, you could do an internship working for a company, a business, or could be, actually, this was in Ireland, but we had somebody working for Paddy Wagon Tours, which was a tour company in Ireland, getting a feel for what it was like to do that kind of work. Any other interests you have? What else might you want to do? Give me some ideas. And
I
I'll
want to
throw
learn
some ideas out.
Chinese. So
Chinese?
know
yeah,
that.
Yeah. I
Going
mean,
from
there's
China.
a great program. And do you have any Mandarin already?
no,
No.
I never done.
And you don't need it. I mean, I had a young man, he had no Mandarin, and he went for 3 months to Beijing and studied Mandarin and martial arts. So he was doing karate, Kung Fu on the side. Yep. And then he was doing the Mandarin, and then he stayed 2 more months. He had 5 months in China, and he placed out of second-year Mandarin at Penn. So he picked up so much language ability just through those 5 months. I mean, he could have been studying it for years here in the States. So for you, you could go off and do like a 3-month cultural study program with your peers in southern China, where you're studying Mandarin, you're living with a family, you're doing service projects, sightseeing, kind of a nice introduction to the country and the language and the culture.
Oh.
Or you could go off and do Mandarin and martial arts.
Yeah,
Do the
or-
students get to see other students from
Their peers?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that can be really important for students if they don't want to be like disconnected from their peers, or if they feel like they might get behind their high school class. And usually what you're going to find is there's so many gap year programs that are set up for your age when you're finishing high school. So you're actually hooked in with your peers. So the one in China, you'd be with 10 or 12 of your peers.
Oh.
So you're not just hurling yourself out into the blue. You have support and structure. Yeah.
So when did this gap year thing originate?
When did it originate? Oh,
Yeah.
originally. It's been in pretty much, I mean, when my father started this work in 1980, it was very new in the US. Nobody was talking gap year. The term actually comes from the UK. So in England, people were taking gap time. It was pretty common at that point. And that's really, I think, where it originated.
Okay.
New Zealand, they have something called the OE, the Overseas Experience, which is like a gap year. And the Germans have the Wanderjahr. And there are a lot of cultures that have this period of time where you step away from the typical track and you explore.
So
And wait a minute, you guys don't know this, but as you get older, it gets so much harder to do this. So you take the time now, because later you get really busy with work and you have 2-week vacations and you have children and mortgages and jobs. You want to explore as much as you can in your teens and 20s. Any older adult will tell you that, I promise you. Okay, so what were you going to say?
So going back, when this term was first introduced in the U.S., was it ever not accepted, or did it have like a hard time being accepted, or when did it really start taking off?
I think that's a great question, because I think early on people thought that if you took gap time you weren't going to go to college, or there was something wrong with you, or you were going to forget how to learn. You know, if I step away from classes, what am I going to do when I head back to school? And that was definitely earlier on. Even now, I still get people saying, you know, this might not be a good thing, and I'm not going to be able to head back to school. What's interesting now, and this is actually a good transition into this data, this is, I could show the camera here, I don't know if you all can see it, but this is Bob Clagett's research. So this is a man who is in Harvard admissions for years, and then he was at Middlebury College's Dean of Admission. And when he got to Middlebury, he decided to see what the gap year students' GPAs were like compared to their peers. And what he saw is that the gap year students' GPAs were higher, pretty much across the board. And then he ran the numbers for UNC Chapel Hill, different kind of university, even more dramatic results. So this is, these are the students who didn't take a gap year, and the light blue are the students who did. So what this means is that these are all students pretty much who didn't do anything academic during their gap year. So they stepped away and they came back to school and they were better students. And then there's a fellow named Mark Hatch, and he's in admissions at Colorado College. So this is another university, it's private university. And Mark said the same thing. He said the GPAs are higher, the gap year students are leaders on campus, there are far fewer emotional issues and dramas, because freshman year people go through a lot, they're away from home for the first time, and these students are much more mature. And also they're finishing college in a shorter period of time. Again, what you may not know is a lot of people take 5 or 6 years to finish college, because they're changing majors, they're changing schools, they're trying to figure out what they're interested in through more classes. And then he said, we'd like to see 20% of our incoming freshman class have taken a gap year. I mean, this is huge. You would not have seen this 10 years ago, with the colleges saying, these are great students to have around. That was a long-winded answer.
But very interesting.
Uh-huh.
I can definitely see how a break could help you. You know, if you're so tired of something, a break could totally help, and you could come back with a totally new perspective on it.
Right. Yeah.
So why don't you tell us some like horror stories or like successful ones that you have?
You got the horror stories. Let's see
Sit
here.
back to
Yeah, let's see. I wrote a few things down here. Well, you know, when people take a gap year, if they don't plan it well, they can land in programs that are not terribly well run. And that can be a bit of a horror story. So if you're in Central America somewhere thinking you're doing a medical internship and the doctors don't even know why you're there, so you're just sitting, and this happened to one of my students who, actually this wasn't our placement, but she found something on her own, and she said, you know, nobody knew why I was there. I was just sitting there twiddling my thumbs, and it was really boring. So that's a waste of time. People get sick. Things happen when you're dealing with life. You know, suddenly you're away from home and you're handling things more on your own. And you can look at it as a horror story, some of these, or it can be positive. So here's an example. My stepdaughter did a gap year. This was a couple years now. So she took a gap year, and she wanted to do something independent. So she landed in Florence and for the first part of her gap year in the fall. And she said, you know what? It was really hot. I didn't know anybody. I didn't speak any Italian. And she said, I burned my bangs. She had cut bangs, and she wanted to curl them, and her wand had heated up so hot because of the change in electrical outlet that it burned her bangs off. So everything was just kind of up in the air. And so she got lost traveling around the city.
Oh,
and she said, it took me about a week, but she said that was one of the best experiences on my gap year, because I had to deal with it, and I did. And I know I'm strong enough to handle those things. You know, a different situation, she said, I just pushed through it. Another girl landed in Greece, and she wanted to do sea turtle conservation work. And same thing with her. She wanted to do something independent. So she said, here I am in Greece. The taxi driver dropped her off, evidently, half a mile from where this sea turtle conservation center is. And she said, I'm in Greece. I don't speak the language. I'm tired. I have all my bags. And she said, I just sat down by the side of the road and bawled for about half an hour. And then she said, well, I should probably get up and keep walking here. And then there it was. The center was right nearby. And she said there again, she said, that was the best experience of my gap year. You can put me in any airport in the world and I'd be fine.
Oh,
So, I mean, I don't know how much you all at this age go off and do things more independently, but when you do, you have the sense of, you know what, I'm fine away from my family. I can handle myself, more independently. And I think in this culture, we don't give you all enough credit for what you can handle.
true. We are
You're pretty, we infantilize our teenagers, and you can handle way more than we realize.
So bad stories can turn into good stories.
Yeah, I mean, it really is how you look at it.
Successful.
I think the main things people need to be aware of is if you're going to take a year like this, you need to do your due diligence. You need to check out programs and make sure they're well run. And you need to have enough going on during the year so that you're not sitting at home twiddling your thumbs when everyone else has gone in college and you don't have enough to do.
Are there ever kids like the person doesn't want to go, but their parents are making them?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I mean, when I brainstorm with families, there are times when the parents have dragged their child into my office, and I can say, and I always do this with the student. I say, look, this only works if you want to do it. For me as a counselor, that's the key. That you all are choosing to take this time. No one's making you do it, because that's more school. You all are expected to go to school and then head to college, and it's a lot of I have to, I ought to, I should. But gap time ideally should be I choose. And so if a student comes in and says, you know what, I don't want to do this, I might say to them, if you are willing to listen, here's what it can be. Based on your interests, here's what you could do. If they still say at the end, I really want to go to college, or I really don't want to do this, then I'll tell the parents, he shouldn't or she shouldn't do it. It makes no sense to push it on somebody. But I think often people don't know what the gap year is and what they can do with it. If you all start to hear all these things you could go do, doesn't it sound more exciting to you? And it's very tailored to what your interests are. Okay, any other questions?
So, Rachel asked us a little bit earlier, but not on camera.
Yeah.
What are the most popular obscure places?
Oh, places, right. Well, we've had people in Old Crow in the Yukon, which is way up north with the Gwich'in Indians, and these are students who were training sled dogs for the Yukon Quest. So they were working with the local Indians. One of the girls who was up there, she was really interesting. She said, it's very strange, this culture, because you have the modern and then the very old. So, she said you'd see people walking around in Calvin Klein jeans and then eating eating tater tots and moose meat. And then they were in these Calvin Klein jeans, but then they had moccasins on at the same time.
That should totally be a trend.
Yeah, very strange. I mean, but again, a total cultural immersion.
Moose?
We've had people in really remote areas in Russia. Down in Micronesia, the islands of Yap and Palau, which most people don't know about, and
Yep.
doing, fishing and teaching kids in schools there. I mean, you really can go to some very far-flung places, as long as you have that landing pad and you know what you're up to there. Yeah.
So, what is the longest that anyone has ever done a gap year or a gap?
Like a gap decade.
That, yeah.
Usually it's a year. It can be less than a year. I've had students do 2 years consecutively,
That's gonna be
back to
Rachel.
back.
It's
Yeah.
gonna be Rachel.
And then sometimes people have taken gap time before college, and then they've taken another gap like I did after their sophomore year in college. So I did my gap year Hawaii, Greece, and then 2 years of college, and then I went to took another gap year, went to India and Nepal. I went back to Greece. I did service work in Appalachia. And then even post-college, sometimes people take time. I have a young man who took a gap year before college, and then he came back to me when he was between jobs, and he said, I have 10 days. What have you got for me? And I said, here, go work on this chocolate farm in Costa Rica. And he said, that's great. And off he went. And he said, that was perfect. And then he contacted me recently again. He said, I'm switching jobs again. I'd like to take some more time, so I've been sending him ideas. That's more unusual. Usually it's when you're a student you can take the time.
So you can do it after the first year of college?
You can, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and a number of students will do it, once they're in college. I mean, sometimes people need to get to college and demystify college, if you will. So they'll go and see what college is like, or maybe they didn't want to take a break before, and then once they get there, they realize, okay, here's college. I'm still going from class to class. I may not be sure what I want to study, let me step away and take some time and explore.
Has anyone ever gone for a gap year and extended it? Like, you know what, I'm staying longer because I love it here.
Within the year, you mean on a program and then stayed longer?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had a young man who went to Japan in the fall, and then he had no idea that he'd want to stay on in Japan. He actually spent the whole gap year in Japan just studying Japanese. Another fellow was actually having a hard time finishing college. He was doing behind-the-scenes theater work. That was his focus. And he said, I'm just stalling out here. I said, why don't you go down to New Zealand and go work behind the scenes, you know, in an internship in New Zealand, in Wellington, New Zealand, which he loved. And he said, this is great. I want to stay here. I'm going to go to school here. And then last I heard he was trying to get married to somebody there so he could stay longer. But no, he's back. But he definitely wanted to stay once he got to this place, and he loved it. So he stayed on for a couple of years there.
So
And
you
he was
can
older.
actually take a gap year, and then when you're in that area, you can like go to school there instead of like go
Sometimes
back.
people do that, yeah. Yeah, actually Samantha, my stepdaughter, when she was on her gap year, she thought about actually attending Trinity College in Dublin, because her gap year was Italy in the fall, a yoga teacher training course for a month in January, and then 3 months in Dublin, Ireland, doing a business internship. And she said, this is great, I love being in Europe, you know, maybe I want to go to school here. And the last minute she said, you know what, I can't take the weather, it's just too gray, cold. You know, I need more sun. But the important thing is, you know, as you look at a gap year is, as you move through it, you're changing. So you can tinker with your plans as you go, because you're changing. So you might have this sense of, okay, I'm going to go do this and then that, and all of a sudden you're heading off over here, based on what's been happening to you in the year and in the experiences.
I already asked it off camera,
Yeah.
but I think the viewers should know. So already you done the gap year, don't usually like somewhat 2 places, but which is better, multiple or just one?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rachel.
Consecutively.
You can. There are programs where you can do one experience for the whole time. So there are group programs where for 9 months you could be going off and doing service work somewhere in the world, and that's all you're doing for that whole period of time. I find it's rare when I'm working with students. It's rare that they're doing that, because I'm laying out all these things. You know, it's like this smorgasbord. So when I lay out all these options, they want to do all these different things. And so typically they're probably doing 2, 3, 4 different programs or experiences in different locations in the world. Yeah, I mean, in a sense, it's like you're lighting matches. You're not trying to tend a fire at this age. It's like, for me, like light the match on marine biology. Okay, blow that one out. I don't want to do that. Ooh, modern Greek. If I could have taken modern Greek in college, that would have been great, because I love learning it in the culture, like the Spanish. And that's what you're doing. You're just striking the matches until you decide what here really lights me up. What do I want to continue with?
So, say someone was staying with the host family. Do they come out of the experience with like a lifelong family, like a second family?
Sometimes, yeah.
Like with a really strong bond?
Yeah, I just actually met a fellow, he's probably in his late 30s, and he came over as an exchange student to Texas. And he was staying with his family, and you know, even after all those years from Europe, that he came over from Europe. So a lot of people have second homes in a sense. You know, if they're staying with a family for 3 months, they become like a second set of parents.
So why don't we talk about host families?
Okay.
So what kind of people are typically host families? Like so how does the whole host family thing work? They're like, oh,
Well,
my house is open for exchange students, or how does it work?
usually host families are part of a program. So
Okay.
if you're going for, say, 3 months to Central or South America, and you want to do service projects and adventure travel and, you know, work with local non-government organizations, you're often staying with local families. So the program is setting you up with homestay families. And often you've got brothers and sisters, so that's where you're actually speaking the language that you want to study. So if you've got your Spanish, so you could do that. You go live with a family, use your Spanish every day, or try to. And you've got often little kids there, so it's easier to speak with them. And they're kind of taking care of you, and they're teaching you about their culture. Here's what we eat, you know, this is how we are. And it gives you a much deeper immersion, even if it's not that long a homestay. So there aren't programs where you just go do a homestay so much. Usually it's tied in with like language classes or some activity or service work that you're doing.
So I just wanted to add in, my Spanish teacher, his first language is English.
Yep.
He went for 4 months to Spain,
Mm-hmm.
and after that he came out and he was fluent in Spanish, and
Right.
he had lifelong friends. I just thought it was sort of
Yeah.
a topic. He was telling us about it in Spanish
And he's
class.
probably really excited about it. I mean, when he talks about it, he's probably really animated,
Yeah,
right?
his face lights up.
Right,
That
and
makes
that's what you get from this, because it's so absorbing. You know, when you land in another culture like that, it's completely absorbing.
So, any last words or stuff to tell people?
Well, I'd be interested to know if you all are excited about taking a gap year.
Yeah.
Jenny, what do you think?
Yes, I really want to go to China. Like, I
Yeah.
really want to learn the language, and I'm really excited to just like adventure into China and see what like there is,
Yeah.
and come back and come.
And even if you're not fluent, you know, when you come back, even if you just pick up a bit of it,
Yeah.
you're probably so excited about the language, you're going to want to keep taking it in college.
Can
So-
I go this year?
Can you what? You want to go this year? No, your mom wants you to finish high school.
Thank you.
Next year? You should talk to your mom about that. So you have to, it helps to be 18 because more is available for you to do.
You got 2 years,
Yeah.
Rachel.
You've got some time. But you know, it's great for you all to think about it, that it's just an option, not that you have to do it, but know that it's there as a possibility rather than it's just high school to college is the only thing, or high school to work. Okay?
That's a really nice ending note. Okay, one last question before we go.
Okay.
How can people contact you or your company?
Okay. So I'm right here in Princeton, and then we have an office in Northampton, Massachusetts. The website's the best thing to go to. So it's interimprograms.com. Center for Interim Programs, or look up interimprograms.com.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you
welcome.
for coming.
Yeah.
You're
Thank you for
welcome.
being here.
Yeah, good.